Fantastic Fest 2023 is behind us, and I got to see 20 movies at this festival for the very first time going this year. How did I rank all 20 of them? Let's get into that. Welcome to the Cinefanatics. My name is Robert Adams, and as I said at the top, I went to Fantastic Fest 2023 this year here in Austin, Texas. I got to see 20 movies over the course of like 8 days. What an insane amount of movies to cram into such a fun-filled week of film. I mean, I had a blast. This was the first time going there. I've been looking at Fantastic Fest over the past couple of years or so, just trying to figure out exactly what it does give and what it would add to both me and, say, the channel here. For those of y'all not familiar, Fantastic Fest is a genre film festival. Usually caters a lot to like horror, sci-fi, action, international, comedy, and it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of good movies that you typically wouldn't go see like normally. I had a fantastic time. A lot of new friends I got to meet there, and a lot of other people and things that I got to experience that I haven't gotten that chance to experience before. So I had a blast with it. I highly recommend, if you ever get a chance to go to it, I do recommend going. A couple of pointers though, real quick. It did seem like a little bit of there was some weirdness with it this year. From what I've been told, according to past years, the ticketing process was insane. I did go as a super fan, meaning I bought the badge as if I was just a normal consumer of wanting to watch movies, and I didn't go as like press or industry. Mainly because I don't feel like the YouTube channel here is big enough to warrant that yet. But one of the benefits to going as the super fan, or I also saw they had the cult badges, were that you were able to choose your tickets a week before the actual event starts, while everyone else, especially like the press and industry, they really only got to choose it 24 hours ahead of time, which is terrible because, especially like, say for my friends Sean Chandler and Cody Leach, Cody Leach I also got to meet at the festival. Wonderful meeting him. But for them, they were needing to watch these movies to film reviews for their very successful YouTube channels, and with only 24 hours notice, they're sitting there like playing this like game of like refresh and click, and the site's crashing, and it's just ambiguous. You don't know if you're going to get a ticket to it, so that I could see is very annoying. And I had some cases like that as like some of the movies that I wanted to see throughout the course of it changed. Recommendations and stuff, especially by the back half, you get a lot of people that are coming out that are talking about what movies they would recommend. As far as how the organization was for it, I loved it. Basically, there's 5 different time slots throughout the day that you can see movies. So they have movies start at some point around like 11 to 5, 8, and 11 at night. Usually these movies are about an hour and a half to 2 hours long, and that gives you about an hour to mingle with the crowd and everything in between, trying to figure out like what movies did you see, what movies did you not see, what would you recommend. And that's what gathers a lot of people and creates those friendships, a lot of those festival friends. So yeah, had a blast with it, very good time, and I would be eager to do this again. But that being said, I've got 20 movies I gotta rank in here, and let's jump into this. At number 20 is Pet Sematary Bloodlines. Alright, so I'm going to say right off the bat, I'm not a huge fan of the Pet Sematary stories anyways. The original was good. The second one is just some bonkers crazy, I don't know what's going on, but Clancy Brown is having a good time and I'm here for it. Did go to the premiere of the 2019 remake at South by Southwest, and now I've also seen the premiere of this one here at Fantastic Fest. This story is messy. I mean, this one's also available currently, I believe, like Paramount Plus right now, so you can watch it for yourself. I don't know why you'd want to, but unless you are a diehard Pet Sematary fan, the story is messy. It is kind of a prequel to the original one, telling the story of the younger Jed, and just him having to deal with the Micmac burial grounds, and there's just so much that's convoluted in here. Now, for being positive about this, I don't think a single one of the actors in this movie is at fault for anything in this. I think it's just a messy story overall. Not quite knowing what it's wanting to do, whether it wants to be political, Jed is trying to go to the Peace Corps, or if it just wants to go into full horror, which I don't feel like it makes as great use of the Pet Sematary as you would want from a movie called Pet Sematary. It just feels very detached from the rest of the stories. There's like little to no reason or motivation for why anyone is doing what they're doing, other than they just want to be either a dick about it, or they're just evil because they may have already been reawoken by the burial ground. But yeah, everything just seems to have a very cheap level to it. Even the title card looks like it was like done in MS Paint. I'm just not a huge fan of the movie. It was okay for entertaining for like 2 hours, but otherwise, yeah, pass on this. At number 19, We Are Zombies. Alright, so when reading the synopsis of this movie, it sounded like it was going to be a fun idea, but I mean, you kind of don't know who the characters are there for a bit. I mean, we're following like a couple of bumbling guys as they're trying to essentially undercut like this giant corporation in a world where zombies now exist, and it's just weird because we've got like these guys, we've got the corporate guys, and then we've got some kind of I don't know, like headhunter type guys going after them as well, and this is all seemingly coming together, and there's no real thought or organization to it. The original idea, the original synopsis, like I said, sounded like it would be a cool idea, but just the execution just does not feel like it is there. I was lost, and this is supposed to be a zombie comedy. This isn't a movie that you're supposed to get lost in. This is a movie you're supposed to sit back, relax, have some good laughs, and enjoy. And I don't feel like I got that at all. I feel like this was kind of a chore to get through. There is some humor, of course. It is a comedy. There's a couple of parts that were chucklish. The gore is there, but I mean, you really don't see too much until like pretty much towards the end of the movie, where everything just dives into complete chaos, and I don't know exactly what we're supposed to be doing or rooting for, or what the end outcome is supposed to be. But otherwise, I don't know. It was a hard movie to get through, and I could have sworn, was that Zach Kornfeld from the Try Guys? At number 18, The Last Video Store. Now, this was great. This was a respectable throwback to like the yesteryear of video stores. And I'm not talking about like your giant franchises like Blockbuster Video or Hollywood Video. For those of y'all familiar with here in Austin, Texas, I would compare this to video stores like iHeart Video or Vulcan Video that we've had here that have sadly since closed because of, well, you know. But this is an interesting concept about a cursed like Necronomicon like VHS, where when you put it into a VCR, it starts making other like movie characters come to life, and it starts kind of like terrorizing this little video store. Mainly like the owner, Kevin, and the one patron who is visiting, who's returning videos from her dead father. And they get plagued by like a bug creature that's very similar to the Predator. They also have to face down like a Jason Voorhees like hockey player guy. And then there's this big like superhero guy who really just turns out to be a giant buffoon and asshole, and basically just does not help him in any way, shape, or form. The movie has like an interesting premise to it. It is a very like homemade, homegrown movie. It is a can-exploitation movie, meaning it's a Canadian movie. The character of Kevin is actually probably the most interesting character, as he actually is a video store owner who his friends Cody Kennedy and Tim Rutherford, the directors of the movie, they actually went and got him to portray basically himself in this movie. So therefore he does a phenomenal job of playing his role. He's one of those type of video store guys that if you got like any kind of questions or anything, he's always eager and willing to offer a suggestion impression or his opinion about a movie, and I think his character is what really helps make this movie. Otherwise, like, you could kind of tell there's kind of got like some basic film techniques to it. There's a lot of push-ins. And if y'all are not familiar with push-ins, they're basically something that you use to emphasize drama or show like more of an isolation by pushing into what we're supposed to be focusing on. And it gives a great dynamic effect of singling something out and making this bottle movie feel definitely like an isolated location. But it's a lot of fun. It's a throwback, but could have used a little more polish in my opinion. But if you get a chance to see it, go check it out. At number 17, Kill. Alright, and others have said this, and I'll continue to hold this tradition. This is going to be a movie that a lot of times when people are trying to explain it to you, they're going to compare it to The Raid Redemption. Obviously, this is a no-holds-barred action movie. This is an Indian movie, but I don't think it technically fits within the Bollywood or Tollywood type of definition of movies. That being said, I am not 100% that familiar with Indian cinema myself, so please don't think of me as any kind of an expert, or how I'm saying things may be wrong, and that's perfectly okay. I will eventually get more into that and be able to be more eloquent about describing those kinds of movies. Otherwise, this is again, a no-holds-barred, balls-to-the-wall action movie that takes place on a train. A lot of times you might think of this as like a good guy versus bad guy, Die Hard on a train. I also see a lot of similarities to the Korean film Train to Busan, even though this movie doesn't actually deal with zombies. It's more of a commando just fighting the bad guys on a train, and a lot of action. Problem with this movie is, like, for the first 20 minutes, I had no idea what was going on. Again, a lot of these movies at this festival I'm going into blind because I've never heard of them at all. Or two, I haven't even been able to read like any kind of a synopsis or get an idea. They do have synopsises synopsi on the Fantastic Fest website, but usually for the most part, I'll avoid reading those just so I can go into these movies fresh and blind to get a good idea of what's going on with it. In some cases, that works beautifully. In some cases, as I'll mention later, that may hurt. But this is a movie that, like, for the first 20 minutes, I had no idea, like, what we were supposed to really be going on. We do learn of these commandos, and we understand which one we're supposed to be following and stuff. So, other than that, the rest of the movie just plays out like a just straightforward action movie. While it is a fun movie, I don't feel like this movie really did anything that I haven't seen before. That being said, like, I know that when you're watching these kinds of movies, especially with a big audience, you like that visceral reaction, that ooh and ah, in which my audience did do that. But I was like, huh, okay, that's cool. Yeah, seen that before. That's great. Oh, you're bashing his face in with a fire extinguisher. Okay, yep, seen that as well. So, like, it doesn't provide anything new for me, but it did make for an interesting flick for the time that I was sitting there watching it. So I do recommend check it out if you are into those kinds of movies. At number 16, Rage. Okay, so here is a movie that, like, it's a good, very well-made movie, but there's fundamentals of this that were just completely lacking. I'm going to try not to be spoilery on this, but there is one element of this that I do feel like I need to share. That way you get the understanding of what I'm talking about. This movie is about a father and his son moves into this gated community in Mexico, and the neighbors just do not like him. They're moving into this community into where the father's brother used to live, and the brother's not there anymore. And just the neighbors didn't like the brother, and they don't like the father and the son, and we're not really told why. They're just trying to make do. They're trying to get on with their lives from whatever it is they were getting away from. And come to find out over the course of this that there may be something in regards to a werewolf within this family, and we're not exactly sure where or why or how or anything. The one little bit of this that I will say that is kind of spoilery, and so if you don't want to see it, hold on just 1 second. There's no actual werewolf in this movie at all. Okay, so that is it for the small spot of spoiler. Yeah, like, I I don't know what the idea behind this. Some of the stuff, most everything was done off screen, so we don't see anything. But yeah, nothing ever actually fully comes to fruition. We just see a lot of people are always upset, and like that I feel like is kind of like just kills the mood of this movie. This movie is sold as a werewolf movie, and you just don't get anything out of it for it. Now, that being said, because this is a very grounded, very I feel like culturally significant type of movie, that there's a lot of this I'm just not going to get. I'm not going to connect to because I don't come from that culture, that background. So some of that may be, I've heard some people were saying they were like crying while they were watching this movie because they felt connected to this movie. So if that is you, then this movie's definitely going to be for you. But for me, it's just, there was a lot of stuff I was hoping this movie would do, especially when being sold on the premise, and it didn't do that. And that's what brings this movie down for me. Otherwise, very well made movie though. At number 15, Where the Devil Roams. Alright, so this movie, this was a wild movie. It's created by a family called the Addams Family, no relation. They do live in like upstate New York, and they tend to just make movies there locally in their area, home shot, and it's very amazing listening to them talk about how they make movies. But this movie is, again, a very weird and wild movie. It begins with someone talking in a monologue or reading a monologue from a book, which seems to go on for quite a bit. And then all of a sudden we are shown like a grocery store and then into a carnival with a bunch of random people. We have no idea who we're supposed to be following, but we're just seeing all these weird and quirky characters all doing random different things. And it's a very bleak and dark type of world as well. And then a little ways after about like say 20 minutes, you finally learn who you're supposed to be following, and we kind of get the idea as to why we're following them and what they're supposed to be doing. And that's what really turns this movie from like a to a okay, this is fun and enjoyable. The way these characters interact, not just with each other, but how they interact with a lot of other people as well, makes it very fun and enjoyable. And I thought like they were doing a very good job. And then the movie spins into what almost feels like a 90s grunge, industrial, alt-rock music video, which is fun, not complaining about that, but it does give it like a weird spin on it, which from listening to the filmmakers, you can kind of tell that's what they wanted to do with it, and so therefore it nailed it on that front. But yeah, it's a very strange and weird movie. I don't know if I would say this would be a movie that is strictly for everyone. There is like a little bit of like gore to this movie, as it is supposed to be kind of horrific with what they're doing. The family that we're following, they do enjoy themselves a little bit of chaos and carnage, not quite to the point of like the Firefly family from the House of a Thousand Corpses Devil Rejects series, but they do have a lot of fun with what they're doing, and they are fun to watch. They're very entertaining to watch, actually. So yeah, I do recommend this movie. This would be a movie that I would say probably could have helped benefit by me reading the synopsis a little bit more on the Fantastic Fest website rather than just going into it blind, because wow. But once it gets going, it does make it more enjoyable, and I think you'll enjoy it too. At number 14 is Spooktacular. Alright, story time with this one. This one's got a bit of a funny story behind it. So at Fantastic Fest every year, there's usually some secret screenings. Last year there were 2, this year there were 4. I saw Spooktacular at what was supposed to be the very first secret screening. What I mean by supposed to be is my dumbass went to the wrong theater room. So, if y'all had seen my previous video short that I did where I was guessing the 4 secret screening movies, my first guess was that secret screening number 1 was going to be Saltburn, and of course I was correct. I just unfortunately was not in the theater to watch it, so I'm sitting in the theater and they say that we're going to be watching this documentary Spooktacular, and I was like, okay, I guess this is a secret screening. And like no one else around me knew that I was talking about the secret screening or anything like that. So yeah, I just thought this was the secret screening. And then after the movie's over, I'm pulling out my phone, hopping on Twitter, and I see the official Fantastic Fest had tweeted out the first secret screening movie is Saltburn, and I'm like, damn it. So instead of Saltburn, which I would have loved to have seen that, I heard good things coming out of that, I got to see Spooktacular, which I don't necessarily mean that to sound like I'm going to dog Spooktacular. Spooktacular is a documentary about one of the first, if not like the first major popular haunted house, or it's more of a spooky hayrides that took place up in Massachusetts. And I'm not typically someone who enjoys going to those types of things. I went to one here in Austin, Texas, long time ago. What was called the Nightmare Factory. I think now, like the one that we get every year is the House of Torment. But these are the kind of haunted houses that have popped up all over the country over the past like 20 years or so. It's the reason why we have like Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios. And yeah, this was a very interesting documentary, to say the least. It's just how they came up with the idea and what they added to it, and some of the pitfalls of going out on a limb and creating such a weird attraction like this. How much business and money it could rack in within the course of just that 1 month, because obviously October is going to be the month of like trying to get all those sales and get all those views and all the people visiting, and just what happened with it. And it, like I said, it was quite interesting. If you are a fan of those haunted house attractions or Halloween Horror Nights, I very much would urge you to watch Spooktacular, just because it is a nice like origin story for all of those, to kind of see where they all came from. At number 13, When Evil Lurks. Alright, so this is a different take on possession films. While like movies like The Exorcist really cared more about following the person who was being possessed, this movie instead takes a look at the community and the small town and how all those people are affected when one of their own becomes possessed. It does have a couple of really good ideas to it and a couple of really good shocking moments for it. This is an Argentinian film, and I think it was very well made. It's just, there's a lot of stuff in this that I don't feel like it pushed the boundary for me. A lot of this movie is very eerie, and it's just an overall tone that just kind of sticks with you, and you don't know like where the evil is going to be, hence When Evil Lurks. But you don't know where it's going to come from or how it's going to manifest itself. And the few ways that you do see it, again, like I said, there are some shocking parts to this. But I feel like as an overall cohesive story, it was losing me at points. Now, I know a lot of people are also going to rate this very high. This is also coming out at the time that the Exorcist Believer came out, and everyone is saying if you need to watch a movie about possession, When Evil Lurks is going to be the better one, which I believe it's on Shudder. So if you want to watch that, check it out on Shudder instead of seeing The Exorcist Believer. But yeah, like it was an entertaining movie, but I just felt like it was a little slow paced for me in some of those cases. But I highly recommend go check it out if you are a fan of possession movies. At number 12, Suitable Flesh. So, this is a H.P. Lovecraft body-swapping movie that's basically made by the team that brought us Reanimator and From Beyond, and directed by Joe Lynch. Yes, please. This sounds fantastic, and it sounds like it would be phenomenal. When you watch this, you definitely see the influence of like Stuart Gordon, Brian Usna, who's also a producer on this. But I do feel like there's parts of this that are a bit lacking, and I'm not exactly sure what it is. I am a fan of Joe Lynch. I loved Mayhem. His movie Mayhem I thought was very well done. But there's something here in regards to, I guess, like the story. Most of the movie kind of seems like it's like a slight, like, late 90s Skinamax softcore porn type of movie. Which the weirdness on that is there's like about 4 like slow pace like sex scenes, and they're clothed. I know a lot of people are always talking about how fake Hollywood is, that in real life, whenever people have sex, they don't actually leave like the bra on or the t-shirt on or something. They usually will go full naked and whatnot. And this movie takes that idea and just completely just like shats all over it. Like, it's, these people are wearing full head to toe clothes throughout these sex scenes, and it's really weird and just very, I know you're wanting more, and the perverted side of you is like, give me that craving, that satisfaction, the whole reason you put a sex scene in there. And granted, to its credit, there is a bit of nudity here and there with like Heather Graham in it. But I mean, this isn't what you're looking for when you're watching a movie and they have a sex scene in it. Aside from that, the body swapping nature of this movie is very interesting. It does play out very much like, say, Reanimator. I definitely get that feeling. We're in that same area. Not to mention, like, this takes place at Mistotonic University, which is where, like, the Reanimator movies take place at, or at least the first two. And it lends itself so well to this story, because you're watching this and you're like, yep, bonkers shit's happening here again. And it's a lot of fun. But yeah, the body swapping, you got Judah Lewis coming off of like the Babysitter movies, who in turn does a phenomenal job in this one. He's not that like whiny little kid from like the Babysitter movies. And then of course you got Heather Graham, and then you also have screen legend Barbara Crampton, who is always fun for jumping into an H.P. Lovecraft movie. So yeah, while the body swapping is really interesting, kind of an angle for this, there is a touch of gore, some blood, and some stuff. It makes it kind of fun, but because of like some of the melodrama in this movie, I really do feel like it slows down some of the fast beat parts that we should be getting at whenever you have a body swapping mystery, trying to piece everything together. It just really grinds to a halt with the sex scenes as well, so that's kind of weird. Big credit to it, though. This is the best use of a backup camera I have ever seen in a movie. No joke, there is a scene that involves a backup camera, and all you're doing is watching the little monitor in the middle of the vehicle instead of watching like anything else, and it's great. I think it's very well shot the way it's done, and I absolutely loved it. But yeah, it's a weird movie. Definitely, if you're a fan of H.P. Lovecraft, the old Stuart Gordon Reanimator stuff, go check this out. At number 11 is Totally Killer. So this movie was done in the same vein as like Happy Death Day and Freaky. It takes kind of like a teenage ideal to something that can be kind of horror-ish, and has fun with it. It's not really gory. This is a fun movie that I think like a lot of the family could watch. I mean, granted, it does have like F words and stuff in it, but it is essentially Back to the Future with a killer. The girl ends up going back in time to the 80s, from current day back to the 80s, which is going to be a big point in this because of how much we are like politically correct nowadays. So going back then, where kids would be prone to calling each other fat, or any kind of like homophobic slurs and stuff like that, you have that plentiful in the 80s, and this one character's like, oh, wow, why are you like this? Ew, why are you a disgusting person? And I think that lent for a lot of fun in there. My only real downside, well, one of the two downsides to this is I don't feel like it used the 80s enough. Other than like a couple like needle drops here and there and some random clothing, there really wasn't anything about this movie that really significantly says that we're in the 80s. And that's kind of a disappointment, because I have a lot of fun with like the pop culture aesthetics of the 80s. I want to see that on the screen. I want to feel like I'm in the 80s. For example, I think the Stranger Things TV show on Netflix does a phenomenal job of that. Granted, there's like a ton of episodes, and now last I checked, each episode is about a feature-length film on its own anyway. So yeah, it's able to more easily do that. But I wish I got that more here. The second thing that I kind of felt was like a downside to this is the ending is just, the reveal of the killer is just sloppy and didn't make sense. while at the same time was also kind of super obvious. So, for those of you who have seen it, you understand what I mean by that. But yeah, it felt kind of like a downer to it. While I know that's not necessarily the focus of this movie, the killer part of it is really kind of like a side portion. It's more about this girl and her interacting with her past mom and friends and all those people. That's what really creates the bulk of this movie and what makes this movie interesting. The killer's just a nice little side part to it. So yeah, it's a fun movie. I would enjoy watching it again, along with like say Happy Death Day and Freaky. I just didn't have as much fun with it as I was hoping I was going to have when you tell me that it's a time travel movie set in the 80s. And I'm like, woohoo, we're going to have fun with this. Not as much. At number 10 is The Fall of the House of Usher. Now, for this one real quick, this is a Netflix TV show that's based off of like an Edgar Allan Poe story. This is a story I really wasn't familiar with going into this, but it is directed by Mike Flanagan, and I absolutely love everything he's been doing so far, so I'm willing to give this a shot. We did watch the first 2 episodes. They didn't show us the entire series. The entire series should be up on Netflix here shortly. And of course, you can binge it because it's Netflix. They're just going to release everything at once instead of like week by week, like a lot of other streamers are now doing. But this one, we got to watch the first 2 episodes, and it was interesting. This is a very, very like a convoluted family with like everything going on, and it's a lot of fun watching to see how the fall of this family takes place. This whole show basically movie. This whole show is basically being retold by the patriarch of the family. He's talking to like a district attorney and telling the story that like most people did not know publicly. He's telling him specifically how each member of his family kind of like succumbed to their own inhibitions and ended up, I guess, dying is what it looks like. And it's very intriguing the way that this story is told. Again, I'm not huge on like TV shows and stuff like this. This is kind of like a blind watching 2 episodes of a show that I had no idea about. And I'll probably continue to watch it later on when I have more time. But this one did end in the second episode ends in a cliffhanger that is just a complete gut punch. And the rest of us were sitting there watching it. We're like, well, okay. Now we gotta wait a couple of weeks to find out what's going on. So I don't know. I'm still kind of like wanting to know what happens after the end of that second episode. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm not eager to jump into any new shows yet. I just got done with Ahsoka. We're diving into Loki. I've got, like, Chucky just started again. I believe we got Invincibles coming pretty soon. And I've got friends telling me I need to watch that Gen V Boys TV series. So I don't know how eager I am to jump into another TV show right now. But this is definitely one I'm going to want to come back and revisit and find out just what the hell is going on in this family. At number 9, Strange Darling. Alright, so I watched this movie. This was the first day of the festival that it finally hit me, like how many movies I'm watching going out to a festival. Again, I typically work right here 8 hours a day talking on the phone, so like going outside, being amongst other people, it was kind of a shock to the system all of a sudden, subjecting myself to that, which no problem, but yeah, it was by this time is when that was starting to weigh heavy on me, and I'm just sitting there in the theater like, okay, next movie, let's go. And then this movie starts, and it pops up saying that it's told in 6 chapters. I'm like, okay. And then it starts chapter 4 or whatever, and I'm like, okay, here we go. This is going to be bouncing all around. It's not going to make any sense, and it's going to be messing with my ADHD, and just, I can't wait to... Nope. This actually is a very easy movie to follow, even though it's 6 chapters, and it's not told, like, chronologically. Which, to its defense, if it was told chronologically, this movie would be nowhere near as good as it is. It is a cat and mouse movie where essentially you've got a character being chased by a serial killer and just what's happening, but we're seeing it in different stages of the story, which makes it a whole lot more interesting than what you would think a standard like cat and mouse type of movie would be. Therefore, it does add like a lot of depth and layers to it, especially because it relies on you to have certain ideas and certain thoughts in your head, and then as you move into another chapter, say like if it goes from 4 to like chapter 2, and a little bit more of the bigger story gets revealed, you're like, oh, okay, so that makes a little more sense. But like, why would they end up doing this later on? And it's so much fun, like having to piece together the layers of the story in your head. It made it such a fun watch. That, and there is a little bit of humor in this. I don't want to say this is kind of like a movie that just kind of like drags everything down. The humor in this movie is fun and is a nice like little break, because it usually takes place kind of right in the middle of the movie, so you do have like a nice little respite away from just, again, the idea of being like chased by a serial killer. That would just, that would be hard on anyone to think of. But this does present it very fun. The two leads of this movie are having so much fun with their characters, and you can see it as an audience member. I thought this movie was great. I had a lot of fun with it. Yeah, it's definitely a movie that I needed to start that day. At number 8 is The Toxic Avenger. Alright, so this was the opening movie of the festival, and it is a remake of the 1984 original. It is silly and goofy and a bit trashy. It does follow in the roots of Troma. It just doesn't push the edge like Troma movies do, and part of that might be kind of like what I was saying with Totally Killer, is we really can't go the way that Troma used to, especially back in the 80s. Just a lot of that stuff isn't going to fly with modern audiences nowadays. And so while it does feel like, while it is a movie that easily is Troma, it's not as heavy as Troma typically is, especially if you've seen anything from Troma recently, like Shakespeare Shitstorm, or even like Poultrygeist. You're not going to get that kind of like just hardcore Troma out of this movie. This movie does play out, though, like a live-action cartoon. The characters are silly. They're off the wall. I love the fact that they got, like, some big names for this. So, like, Peter Dinklage, Jacob Tremblay, you've got Elijah Wood, and, of course, the always popular and easy to connect to Kevin Bacon. Like, a lot of these actors are not ones that you would typically see in a Troma movie, because it's Troma. It's not supposed to be this big, huge movie. And that's what this movie is doing. It's taking the idea of Troma and putting it up on the big screen for, like, a wide audience to enjoy. And I think it is very enjoyable, even if you're not a Troma fan. I will say, again, this movie feels like a live-action cartoon. It's basically a live-action R-rated version of the Toxic Crusaders cartoon from the 90s. If y'all are familiar with that, I was a fan of the Toxic Crusaders cartoon, and I know we haven't really gotten like a full-on trailer. We've just gotten like clips and like images and stuff now. There hasn't been a full reveal as of right now. There hasn't been a full reveal of what Toxie actually looks like. He does look very similar to how he looked in that cartoon, just like with like one black eye with like the red pupil, kind of like what the poster shows. But otherwise, yeah, just think of it as Toxie from the Toxic Avengers cartoon. But yeah, it's just wild and kind of like all over the place. While it does have a very simplistic story and it does have characters that you could connect to, it just isn't really tight and coherent, and I think that's the only downside to it, is I would have liked more of a tighter knit story, but it is a lot of fun. And again, if you're a fan of the original or if you're a fan of Troma, you're gonna like this movie whenever it eventually comes out. Coming in at number 7 is Dogman. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, what? And funny story about that, let me tell you. This was the third secret screening, and by this time we had almost everyone seemingly agreed that it was going to be Exorcist Believer. We were going to get the premiere of Exorcist Believer before it was released wide, which would make sense. And so the the person in charge of programming, the director of programming for Fantastic Fest, she comes out and is talking about, like, yeah, so here's our next movie. We really should have brought out the dogs for this. And everyone's like, dogs? You're not going to show us Paw Patrol, because this whole entire theater will be burnt to the ground if they announce that we're watching Paw Patrol. And no, they said it was going to be a movie called Dogman. And we're all like, what? The fuck is Dogman? Like, this doesn't... Huh? So this is a new movie from Luc Besson. And it's a story of a guy that was abused as a kid. He grew up with friends, like, he finds friendships with dogs, and he finds, like, a place to belong with, like, this drag queen show. And it's him telling his story, like, basically starting over at the beginning, like Forrest Gump, and telling his story of how we got to where we're at the beginning of this movie. The thing with this is it does add some really interesting ideas. He essentially becomes like a mob boss in such a way with all these dogs, and it kind of is like an anti-hero type of scenario. There's one bit where someone, like, hires him to go after this other guy who's being mean or being evil or whatever, and Dogman and his dogs, he uses his dogs to go after this bad guy, and it's really interesting. That was, like, a really interesting point. This is, like, something you want to watch. This is much like the studio executive getting the horse head in his bed at the beginning of Godfather. Like, that is an interesting scenario, and I want to see how that all continues. And I want to see him do that with, like, multiple people, just helping out the neighborhood, helping the less unfortunate, because he himself comes from that viewpoint, comes from that kind of a abused background, shunned by society, doesn't know where he belongs. And this is a way that he can use his dogs and something that he does enjoy for powers of good, if not, like, more of an anti-hero kind of situation. And we only get that, like, once in the entire movie. And that's what I was really hoping to get out of this. And we don't see a whole lot more than that. So, that being said, the story is still good. It is still interesting. It is intriguing. I was very well entertained for the entirety of this movie. And I do believe it should actually get some kind of an Oscar nomination for Caleb Landry Jones. Just unfortunately, this is the type of the movie that there's no way in hell the Academy's ever gonna recognize that this movie exists at all. Just, it's not happening. But, I mean, kudos to Caleb Landry Jones for just doing a phenomenal performance in this movie. The way it's shot, the way it's made, all of it was gorgeous. I was pleasantly surprised, but good lord, this is a terrible Exorcist movie. At number 6 is VHS 85. So this seems to be a staple of every single one of these Fantastic Fests. If there's a Fantastic Fest, there's a new VHS movie. And they did it again this year with VHS 85. The problem with this right off the bat is they showed this as like a later movie. Like I was saying earlier with the breakdown of the time frames of the movies, this one was, I guess, supposed to be at 11, but there was kind of a delay to it, so it didn't actually start until like almost midnight. And this is a hard type of movie. When you've been watching movies all day, you've been standing out in Austin, Texas heat in September, which is still pushing like 100 degrees, and you're just tired. It's at the end of the day, and you're going to sit down to watch one final movie, and there's this VHS flickering and, like, you know, the tracking motions and stuff. From those of y'all that are familiar with VHSs, I know I'm speaking to a very, very select audience here, but the way that the VHS tapes used to look, you have those effects layered in kind of like as filters onto this movie. It's just very hard to watch that late at night. So I would urge, if anyone from Fantastic Fest is watching this, let's try to make an effort to play it earlier in the day and not so much like last movie at the end of the night. Thank you, that would be great. Otherwise, these movies are, they do have some fun parts to it. It's nice to see like these individual stories and where they may particularly go. They're not all going to be winners. A lot of these stories are going to be hit or miss. Like in an anthology movie like this is one of the weaker wraparound stories I've ever seen. It doesn't give very much of a reason as to why we are watching VHS tapes. It just doesn't solidify its existence, in my opinion. Some of the individual stories, again, some of them were kind of weak. One of the first ones involves like these teenagers out on a boat. It's very weird because you don't know what exactly is happening, but by the time you realize what's going on and you're getting into the story, it's the end of the story. And it comes back kind of later in the movie and kind of gives somewhat of an explanation, but it doesn't give you a satisfying explanation to it. So I was really hoping for more of that. In my opinion, though, I will say that probably my favorite segment was the one directed by Scott Derrickson. This is the one that had like a more fleshed out idea, so to speak, and it was a lot of fun to watch, and like had a full like beginning, middle, and end third act within the confines of this one story, and I thought that was the best part of the entire movie. But again, this is late at night, and it was just kind of a drag to get through in some cases. At number 5 is Dream Scenario. Alright, so this was the second secret screening, and I didn't know anything about this. When they said it's Dream Scenario starring Nicolas Cage, I was like, okay, I remember there is a Nicolas Cage movie that's coming out. I don't know anything about it. So before the movie played, I did quickly like look up like what was the synopsis on this. I know the trailer had already been released, and I hadn't watched the trailer yet because I've been focused on going to this festival. And so when I read the synopsis, I was like, oh wait, this is gonna be fantastic. This is gonna be phenomenal. Nicolas Cage is popping up in everybody's dream. This is gonna be hilarious. I can't wait to see the scenario that this is going to cause. And while it is a great idea, it kind of, in my opinion, kind of falters like and about halfway through, then towards the end, it does have kind of like a dark turn that I feel like zaps all the fun out of it. Like a lot of like the fun and the humor of this premise is just completely like zapped away by it. And sure, I guess that's the way that the filmmakers wanted this movie to go. They wanted the story to go this way because they were hitting like a meaning behind it. But it just, when sitting there watching this, you're like, wow, this could be great, and what? Oh, okay. So we just ruined my fun. Yeah, sure. Okay. But otherwise, yeah, I think it's a very well done movie. For the story that we do get, I think it is a fun story overall. It does have some meaning to it, and yes, it is hitting a very particular goal by the end of this movie that, while I might not have appreciated or enjoyed, I know a lot of people will find that is completely satisfactory. So, I liked it. I thought the pacing kind of slowed down and it just petered out there at the end. At number 4 is The Creator. Alright, so I've already done a full review for this movie, which you can watch right up here. This was a fun, entertaining movie. It doesn't have any lofty high ideals like Tenet had. This is a sci-fi movie that's very easy to follow and is a lot of fun. And again, it follows a lot of the same, or it borrows a lot of the same storylines like Blade Runner, Terminator, Children of Men, and I've said it before, it's mixed in with like just a little bit of Star Wars in there. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. The acting is phenomenal, especially from Madeleine Yuma-Voiles. I can't wait to see more things from her. I highly recommend this movie. If you have yet to be able to see this movie on the big screen, go check this movie out. It was a lot of fun, and yeah, enjoyed it. At number 3 is Saw X. Alright, and then again, another movie that I have already done a full review on. Make sure you go check that out right up there. Anyways, yeah, so again, this is a movie that puts John Kramer's Jigsaw right front and center, which is exactly what this franchise needed. It doesn't rely on flashbacks or jumping around in the timeline to tell a story. It is its own singular, cohesive story, and it does it very well. I love the fact that we get Jigsaw as pretty much an anti-hero in this. You feel more sympathy for him in this than you ever have in any of the other Saw movies, because basically he's just preaching I'm not a killer, and yeah, he is, whatever, sanctimonious asshole. But otherwise, this was a fun movie, and I think it is actually one of the better movies of the entire Saw franchise, which I'm a huge fan of. I highly recommend it. Go check this out if you have not seen it already. It is a blast. Number 2 is Riddle of Fire. So this was a movie that was sold as kind of like a fantasy movie, and those of y'all who know me know I'm not very much of a fantasy movie fan. As you can see my my rating and review of Dungeons and Dragons earlier this year, I'm just not a huge fan of it. The nice benefit to this movie is it doesn't actually rely on fantasy. There are some fantasy elements to it, like the lead villain may be a witch. And then there's a lot of like the fonts and stuff used. One character in this movie is subtitled, just because they tend to mumble and they're hard to understand. But it's a lot of fun when the captions come up and it's in that fantasy font. It's just, this is a fun, enjoyable movie. It's about 3 kids that are basically, they're trying to play a video game, and the TV is password protected, and so they got to get the password from the mom, and the mom wants them to do this, that, and the other first. And it's just a series of events, and basically them trying to make a blueberry pie that leads them down the road to running afoul of like this witch woman and her like clan or her cult family members. And it's just, again, kind of like the Goonies, where they run into like the family of criminals. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of heart to this movie, and I feel like that's what really makes it. The dialogue is snappy and witty, especially from the 3 kids. The visuals are gorgeous, because a lot of this movie takes place like out in the middle of nowhere woods and mountainside, and it's just gorgeous landscape the whole entire time. The characters are very, very cartoonish and quirky, and they're just a lot of fun to watch and listen to. And this is such a good movie. There's like, I know I'm just gonna speak very little about this movie because I want you to be able to see this and enjoy it, because it is fun. But if you don't have a smile on your face by the time this movie ends, you're just dead inside. Plain and simple. And my number 1 movie from Fantastic Fest 2023 is The Last Stop in Yuma County. So yeah, easily my most favorite film of this festival. Those people who were there with me when I first saw this movie, I was doing nothing but singing the praises of this movie after watching it. This is one of those, kind of like what I was talking about, those time periods in between the movies. You have time to gather with people that like maybe you've hung out with in a movie, or like maybe some friends who went to the festival with you. If y'all didn't see the same movie, you come back and you talk about what movie did you just see and would you highly recommend it. And I just could not stop talking about this movie. It is so much fun. It is a movie that takes place like at a gas station, diner, motel type of location. It's in the middle of nowhere out in like Yuma County, Arizona. It's 100 miles from like another gas station, and this particular gas station has ran out of gas. So all these travelers are stuck here waiting for the gas truck to arrive, and it just so happens amongst these travelers are a couple of bank robbers. And then the story unfolds once these characters start to realize that these characters are bank robbers. And what happens is that you get the slow build of tension, because you, the audience, knows, and then there's some characters that know, and so you're watching the bank robbers, you're watching the characters who know they're bank robbers, and then you're watching the characters who don't know they're bank robbers. And those are 3 different kind of points of view that you're watching within the confines of this, and it makes for very interesting, very dynamic storytelling. the dialogue in this movie is very quirky, very Tarantino-ish, I would say. It is a lot of fun. It's just the way that dialogue is said and spoken, just delivered, is just so good in this movie. And it's not like, this isn't a huge like over the top movie either. This is a very low budget movie. The movie was financed by a guy selling his house to make this movie. So yeah, this movie is made for the cost of selling a house. And I think that, in my opinion, even though I don't have any kind of connection to it, this is probably like one of the best financial decisions that guy's probably ever made. But this is very enjoyable. It does have a lot of like keeping you on the edge of your seat moment. I would actually refer to this, if you're familiar with the diner scene at the end of Pulp Fiction, it's a lot like that. Only it's a lot more fun, it's a lot more quirky, and it's a lot more edge of your seat because of the three different positions that these characters are in. It does build the tension to that inevitable way that this movie is going to go. And then after that, it's a whole like, who knows what direction we're going to go with this? Who knows what's going to happen? Because this movie gets bonkers and then goes, and it's just wild. For a movie that takes place primarily only in this one location, it is so much fun. I had such a blast with this. This is a movie, again, that I think Tarantino could easily nestle into this world because of how everything comes together in it. Just I cannot sing the praises of this movie enough. Be on the lookout for this. This is going to be director Francis Galuppi's first feature film, and I cannot wait to see what else he comes with just based off of this one movie alone. At this time, as far as I know, there's no distribution for it, so just keep an eye out for it. And of course, if you're following us here, you will hear me probably talk about this movie again and again the more and more we get information or a trailer coming out. It's so much fun. You're gonna love this movie, I promise. Anyways, that's going to do it for my list. That is all 20 movies that I shoved into the period of 8 days. That's a lot of movies. That's a lot of theater to sit in. So yeah, what did you think of it? Were there any standouts to you? Let me know down below. Did you also go to Fantastic Fest? What is your list? What did you think of this? Where is your placement on some of these? And what movies out of this list are you wanting to now keep your eye on? I highly recommend Last Stop in Yuma County and Riddle of Fire. Those were just so good. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow us over here on Cinefanatics. Hit that like button and subscribe. You can follow me at Robert Adams MLP on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd. Also follow us, the Cinefanatics, at the Cinefanatics on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. We have short videos. Might be doing some more rankings coming up. Anyways, that's going to do it for this. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next one. Goodbye.